top 10 center fielders for the year 2024. But before we get into the actual top 10, we need to talk about the guys that I had in the preseason top 10 center fielders list who really weren't top 10 center fielders coming out of the year. Now, also, I need to point out I did not include Victor Robles in this list. He had a 3.1 WAR, which probably would have been good enough to get him into the top 10 center fielders, but he played basically 30 games in each outfield spot. I didn't really know where to put him. He probably would have been a top 10 outfielder in left field, center field, or right field. Just didn't really know which spot to put him in. So I wanted to point that out there. But then getting to my preseason top 10, the guys that failed to make the actual top 10, we have to start with Evan Carter, our preseason number 8, Jung Ho Lee, our preseason number 10, and Mike Trout, our preseason number 4. All of those guys missed massive amounts of time, which really made it impossible for them to get into the top 10. Obviously, Trout got off to a very hot start but was cut short. Carter had a lot of hype coming out of the playoffs from the season before, but he only played 45 games and was really struggling to get it going. And then Jung Ho Lee, really kind of similar, coming over from Japan, had a lot of hype, started the season out a little bit slower, but once he started to hit his stride, he was looking good, and then he got hurt really as soon as he started to turn that corner and look good. Now, those 3 guys missed this list basically because of injury, but they weren't the only guys to miss out on being top 10 center fielders for 2024 who were all on our preseason list. There was also James Outman, who was our preseason number 7. He played so poorly that he lost his job to Andy Pages, who also played so poorly that he lost his job to Tommy Edman. And then Luis Robert Jr. was our preseason number 3. I don't really know what happened with him. I didn't watch much of the White Sox. He did miss some time. He didn't play well when he was on the field, so I don't really know what happened there. And then also Michael Harris Jr., our preseason number 5. He also did miss some time, but he still managed to play 110 games. He looked rather off at the beginning of the season, but then when he came back, he actually was a massive part of the Braves' comeback and helped them down the stretch to actually make the playoffs. But overall, it was still a rather disappointing year for him when you combine the missed time and then how he started the year. Yeah, so our preseason top 10, it was a disaster. It was not a good list. But let's get into the actual top 10 center fielders now. And we're going to start with Elliot Ramos, who is the number 10 center fielder of 2024. He took over for Jung Ho Lee when he got injured, and really Ramos should be a corner outfielder, and defense was his struggle. So looking to next year when Jung Ho Lee is back, you figure Elliot Ramos will get shoved over to one of the corners where he will be able to perform more acceptably on the defensive end. And then, of course, his bat was just so awesome for the 2024 season, and he was really a bright spot for the Giants' overall mediocre team. Then at the number 9 spot is Cedric Mullins, who did everything really well, but nothing really great. He was mildly above league average when it came to hitting, mildly above average when it came to defense, and he was pretty good on the base path too. Production could have been a little bit better. He came in with under 70 runs scored and under 60 RBIs, which is not the best, but again, just good enough at everything to get himself on this list. Then at the number 8 spot was Julio Rodriguez, who had a very disappointing year. If we're being honest, if this is the worst he is, then that's a really high floor. Now, he was our preseason number 2. Obviously, that's where his expectation is. He did have a little bit more run production than what Cedric Mullins had when it comes to runs and RBIs, but he had less stolen bases than Cedric Mullins. He continued to play really good defense in center field, and his bat did heat up, but it really wasn't close to the MVP superstar upside that we know he has. Then at the number 7 spot was Cody Bellinger, our preseason number 6. And while he missed some time due to injuries, and PCW did take over his spot, Bellinger did still play most of his games in center field, with over 70 runs and 70 RBIs. It's very solid. And then at the number 6 spot, we have Byron Buxton, our preseason number 9. No surprise here, he missed some times. He played 100 games, but when he played, he was absolutely amazing. This seems to be the theme for the Twins superstars. And that's really what we've come to expect from Buxton, right? When he's on the field, we know he's going to be great. The question's always how much is going to be on the field. And this year, he was on the field for about 100 games. But 100 games of elite level play is better than what a lot of other teams were getting from their center fielders. Now, this is a shock. The number 5 center fielder of 2024 was Brenton Doyle. Now hold on a second. Before you go crazy on this one, he hit over 20 home runs. He stole over 30 bases. He had over 70 runs and 70 RBIs. And you could make the argument that obviously his offensive numbers are well above average only because of Coors Field. But he's the first Rocky to make any of our top 10 lists. So we might as well give him some credit for being their best player. His WRC plus might be below average, but he had an offensive run value of 9, which is well above average. He was obviously great on the base path, and he is charged with being the defender of the biggest center field in all of Major League Baseball. And well, he does that very well, as he is one of the most elite defenders in the game. So Brenton Doyle does deserve some flowers for the way he's played. Now at the number 4 spot, we have Jackson Merrill, who was not in our preseason top 10. Honestly, we just really didn't know that he was going to be in the MLB this year. But boy, did he look good, and boy, does he look like he belongs at the MLB level. And he looks like he belongs in center field too, which is big considering he was playing shortstop not that long ago. He's a guy who did everything incredibly well. I mean, he had 20 home runs, a lot of run production, he ran the bases. His advanced hitting stats were great, his regular stats were great, and of course, some really good defense. But then another young center fielder who took off this year was Jarren Duran. He had a solid rookie season, but he really took a massive step up this year. He had a little bit more offensive production than Merrill, and he was also just a little bit better on the base path. And then he and Jackson Merrill were basically the same defensively. But then the number 2 center fielder in all of baseball was Corbin Carroll, who was not in our preseason top 10 because we thought he was going to be a right fielder, and he was our preseason number 4 right fielder. But with the injury to Alek Thomas this year, Carroll had to take over center field. And like Julio, it was a bit of a disappointing year for him, but he still hit more home runs and stole more bases than Jarren Duran. He scored 120 runs, he walks a lot, he doesn't strike out all that much, and obviously he heated up down the stretch of the year, and of course he plays great defense. And then at the number 1 spot, the number 1 center fielder in all of baseball in the year 2024 was our preseason number 1, Aaron Judge. I don't think I need to go in depth here. Obviously, he blew every other center fielder out of the water with his offense. His defense is bad, really. He shouldn't be playing center field. He's a good right field defender, but in center field, he's just mildly below average. But that really doesn't matter when you hit the way he hit in 2024. So that is our top 10 center fielders for the year. Make sure to come back next time for our top 10 right fielders, and then later on when we come back around and give our preseason rankings for 2025.